Hey there, we're taking a look at Far Cry 4 running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5500U. Now, the game is currently running at 1080p with the lowest graphics settings, and the chip is currently set to the stock 15 watts. And at these settings, while we're not getting amazing levels of performance, you can see by the frame times it's pretty consistent. And what that is going to end up meaning is that this is going to be relatively playable. Though you will see a lot of moments of spikes happen in the frame times, and it's usually when new things are being loaded in. So it's definitely not going to be an ultra smooth experience, and no one's really going to think that with a 30 FPS average, but it's definitely going to have the occasional stutter here and there. So overall, it really seems like the stock setting can't really produce a high enough level of performance in here. But in all honesty, this game in 1080p is heavy enough that I don't think it really would have done any better with a higher TDP, but we'll see that later on. One thing to note though is that this is relatively playable, honestly. I really wouldn't say it's a bad experience or anything like that. It's just not going to be the smoothest experience, but overall you can get away with playing like this. I've played games in far worse conditions. Now, dropping the resolution down to 720p does net us a pretty nice performance uplift, especially considering that we're still just at the 15 watt TDP. At this point, we're pretty much just getting a 60 FPS average a lot of the time, with 1% lows that are just dropping down into the high 40s, which to me seems like a more than playable experience. If anything, this actually feels pretty incredible to play. It's pretty great, honestly. And what this means is that if you have a system that really doesn't have the headroom to let you turn up the TDP, well, you're still going to at least be able to get a playable experience out of this. Just drop the resolution down to 720p, and honestly, it looks perfectly fine like that on the screen of a laptop. So I was genuinely impressed overall by how 15 watts performed, more so just by how it did in 720p. Though at 1080p, it still impressed me in that it was able to at least keep a consistent enough experience. Thing is though, is that if you can actually raise the TDP, you can actually net a pretty nice performance uplift. Because now we're looking at the game running at 1080p, but with the 25 watt setting. And now we're looking at averages in the 40s, with 1% lows dropping down into the low 30s. That pretty much is like a completely different experience from what we were getting before. This is far more playable, far more playable. This pretty much means that in the most intense scenarios, we're pretty much just going to be dropping down into the 30s, maybe high 20s, instead of going down into the low 20s or maybe even high teens. So it's definitely a nice performance uplift at 1080p, but at 720p, it's really not as noticeable as a performance uplift. It's definitely there. You're pretty much now just getting 1% lows that are going to be closer to 50 than anything else, and your averages for a lot of the time are going to be above 60. And really, just in general, the frame times have been just leveled out to the point where it is a very smooth experience to play the game. But it's just not as noticeable of an uplift because of the fact that we pretty much went from the game feeling practically unplayable at 1080p to just being relatively enjoyable. And here we're pretty much just improving on an experience that was already pretty solid. So it's definitely a welcome uplift, but it's not going to be life-changing. And overall, I'm very happy to see how this game has performed on this chip. But anyways, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.